And welcome. This is John Davidson, and this is Career Coaching After Hours. It's the Deep Thought series. Hard to believe it's already episode 4, so thank you to all the new viewers, and thank you to the folks who've been watching since the beginning. I very much appreciate it. This series, as you may or may not know, is my attempt to meditate and dig a little bit deeper into topics that clients have asked about, or topics I've written about, or both in some cases. And it's basically audience agnostic. So as a career coach, career counselor here in the Seattle area, I work with a diverse range of amazing professionals, and I get a lot of different questions about career direction, strategy, resumes, LinkedIn, cover letters, negotiation. And so my hope with this series is we can dig a little bit deeper after hours. But again, please keep in mind I'm likely not your career coach, so I'm going to be giving kind of generalized information that I hope is useful to maybe even other career coaches, but also to folks who may be on the career search trail or might want some kind of generalized advice. And if you're one of my clients, I hope you find this helpful as I dig a little deeper into some of the topics you care about. As usual, these episodes or webisodes are to the best of my knowledge, so I'll do my very best to stay up to date and current. But one of my big pieces of advice here on YouTube, as I've made my return back to YouTube, is protect yourself. Consider who's doing the episode or webisode that you're listening to, and maybe take a look at their background and qualifications before you spend time here today. And generally these episodes are going to be in the 15 to 30 minute ballpark. And so I had a lot of fun with this episode. I get a lot of questions from clients on a regular basis in terms of skills. And I get questions like, what are the most important skills to mention on a resume or on a LinkedIn profile, or maybe even in an interview? So one of my very favorite topics, skills. How do we communicate our skills on paper or on the page and on the stage? And of course, LinkedIn has made a lot of changes to their skills index and their skills system here in the last 3-4 months. So I'll dig into that here just a little bit as well. This probably could have been about 3 or 4 different episodes, so I'm going to try to power through a lot of information fairly quickly. So I reserve the right to dig in a little bit deeper. And so a little while ago, I did a post on LinkedIn, almost an article, kind of elbowing everyone to check their skills, update them, and LinkedIn has made a pretty seismic shift to the skills index recently and has lifted the lid from 50 to 100 skills. So again, I believe LinkedIn is quite important. Full disclosure, I've been using LinkedIn since 2006. LinkedIn not too long ago hit 1 billion registered users just here in December 2023. Pretty big news. So in my opinion, LinkedIn isn't going anywhere. It's a bit of a juggernaut. I believe it's arrived. But as a dovetail on this, one of my favorite films of all time is Napoleon Dynamite. And so in spirit, at least, I've got Dr. Dynamite with us here today. And in researching this webisode, I realized that film is 20 years old as of this year, June 2004. That film came out, and I've elbowed a lot of clients to take a look at the film, almost tongue-in-cheek, but there's a really, I think, entertaining scene where he's talking about skills, and so it's one of my favorites. It's up there with Patch Adams or Catch Me If You Can or King's Speech, some of those movies that I've recommend clients take a look at, maybe if they're in career search mode or they need a little bit of a break from job search, career search activities. So Dr. Napoleon Dynamite will be with us in spirit, reminding us you got skills. And so again, I believe the film is a little bit legendary. I think it's a cult classic, but 20 years later, I can't believe it. What I found really interesting, I've put a couple links here too, if you want to search out some of the scholarship on Napoleon as a character, who maybe represents neurodiversity, is a bit quirky or interesting in how he communicates against a fictional character, but those links are there if you want to check that out. So initially, I'm going to talk about some of the big ticket questions I get in terms of skills. Then I'm going to dive into Dr. Dynamite's thoughts on 3 categories of skills. And so this is a big ticket, $1 million question. What are the most important skills? I don't have a perfect answer. I do get this question from folks, and a lot of times I'll say it depends. So what are the most important skills to put on a resume, or to talk about in a job interview, or to put on LinkedIn? Arguably, those really do depend on the person or the context, but I think it's really interesting to think about skills in terms of that classic acronym KSA, and you might be familiar with that: knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSA. And every once in a while you'll see a job description that specifically calls that out: knowledge, skills, and abilities, as if they're totally different. And I think a lot of times they get conflated, or maybe it's just a difference without a distinction, as in, what's the difference between knowledge or skills or abilities? Maybe they're all kind of the same thing. Or maybe it's quite simple: knowledge is something you know, skills and abilities are things you can apply, perhaps. So maybe we don't need to get too wrapped up in all that. But again, keep in mind, you got skills. And thank you very much to Brandsmith for creating this. To my knowledge, this is a purchasable poster, so I think I might just have to get one myself. But no brand or sponsorship is implied. And so a really tactical question I get pretty regularly: well, what about skills on my resume? And so, as you know, or maybe know, perhaps if you're one of my clients and you've seen some of my episodes, a resume, arguably the most valuable document we own or ever will own. And so one thing I might caution folks to do is to think about a resume as more than just a way to beat applicant tracking systems. And arguably a really important issue if folks want to get a job interview. If you apply to a company, say Microsoft or Amazon or Boeing or Starbucks, your resume then goes into an ATS, applicant tracking system. So I would caution folks to think about their resume is more than just a way to beat kind of the resume robots, in that when you do land an interview, then interviews often shift gears to a panel or a loop of real human beings. And so what you might do on the resume to beat an ATS, applicant tracking system, may be a little different than what you talk about in person. So I'm going to argue for some consistency. Hint, hint. And as Dr. Dynamite reminds us, you got skills. All right. And so, like I touched on a little earlier, certainly LinkedIn has made some pretty epic seismic shifts in terms of how skills are communicated, and I'm overall pretty happy with this. I haven't met too many folks who are somehow upset that the lid was lifted. And so I was one of those folks that felt like 50 was a bit constraining, and frequently I'd work with folks who felt like only 50 skills wasn't really a lot to work with, especially when you start to consider on LinkedIn, you might want to list out software skills, maybe Word or Excel or PowerPoint or Zoom or Skype or Teams or the cloud. And so some of those tactical skills each eat up one of those skill index places. So there's that. But absolutely let me know your thoughts in the comments if you think maybe it should be even higher, or maybe we should go back and focus on a top 50 index versus letting that lid double and mushroom. But one other key note here too, assessments, you might notice that if you go into LinkedIn, no longer can you get an assessment badge, essentially a proficiency badge for Excel or PowerPoint or Word or some of the other programs out there. So those have been eliminated here just about 4 months ago. So kind of FYI, but you know what? Dr. Dynamite and I agree, you got skills. And you can certainly write about those on LinkedIn. But then maybe a really interesting topic where the rubber hits the road is, how do you discuss skills in an interview? And again, I'm going to recommend that if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. So do keep in mind that, for example, whatever skills you put on a LinkedIn profile or a resume, you may have to explain that in an interview of some kind. So I'd say be really careful about that, and it really leads to some interesting questions. Let's say on LinkedIn, maybe you do want to make some room for some softer skills, maybe communication or time management, perhaps skills that could be learned from a book or a class, but maybe are soft skills or personality traits. So I mean, that really raises some interesting questions there. So, all right. Of course, once again, you got skills. Did I mention I love this meme? I absolutely love that. But of course, now in the film, there's a scene where Napoleon Dynamite is talking about 3 types of skills and kind of skills he wishes he had or that he's working on. So, movie is a comedy, last I checked, but maybe he's actually a career coach and a career counselor in the universe of Napoleon Dynamite. Now, he'd be out of high school at this point. And so one of the first things he says is nunchuck skills and bow hunting skills, computer hacking skills. I'm going to touch on those as metaphors. So if we think about nunchuck skills, even though it's a comedy, maybe that really is kind of code, or we can think about that a little bit differently other than literally flailing away with nunchucks like Michelangelo, the Ninja Turtle. But personally, for example, I've studied martial arts. I have a purple belt, Taekwondo. I've used nunchucks. I don't care for them, and I didn't particularly enjoy that part of the training. But it does force you to be coordinated. It's not easy whatsoever. So maybe it's kind of a code for a growth mindset, or shifting paradigms, or adaptability. And it's almost like every year we see articles as far as what skills should you put on a resume, or what skills should you talk about in an interview. But maybe nunchuck skills is kind of this metaphor for emotional intelligence, or just learning something new, even project management, trying something out, training yourself how to do it, showing up to practice, doing something that's maybe uncomfortable, maybe doesn't seem totally practical right out of the gate. But great way to build some agility and dexterity. Again, to be clear, I'm not good at it. Or maybe it's just sense of humor. So again, as a comedy film, think of nunchuck skills or bow hunting skills, computer hacking skills, maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But I will say, if someone mentioned that they had those 3 skills in an interview, I might be fairly likely to move them along in the interview process. I might get a chuckle out of it, and you could make a good argument that sense of humor is a tremendously valuable skill. And arguably project management and a lot of those other skills in the previous slide, universally valuable. So now moving into the second category for Dr. Dynamite, bow hunting skills. And to be clear, I believe in the film he's talking about bow and arrow skills, not bow staff like Donatello the Ninja Turtle, to mine my memory of Ninja Turtle lore. But maybe bow hunting is a metaphor too. Anyone who's tried to use a bow and arrow, even a toy one, again, not something I'm good at whatsoever, but maybe it takes some precision. And we can think of bow hunting skills as this kind of metaphor for skills like process enhancement, or analytics, or adaptability, time management, even strategy, or just tenacity to practice something. And so I've had coworkers who legitimately did bow hunting, and that takes a certain level of precision and practice. I thought was really interesting. So one thing I might caution job-seeking candidates and then also hiring managers is really consider how you ask questions in interviews, for example. So if you're talking to somebody about a skill set or a sport that they play or an example of tenacity or grit, you may want to ask them for an example of a skill, and they may tell you but not use the example quite the way you think. So for example, if somebody says, tell me about a time when you exhibited tenacity or grit, or you learned something new, they might talk about learning a martial art or for a skill, but they might not use the phraseology of tenacity or project management. And so they're giving you an example of the skill, but maybe not quite pinging those keywords. So much like that resonance between a job description and a resume, I think we all need to keep our ears open a bit, perhaps. Keep our senses open in an interview situation. So category 3, as I wrap up, computer hacking skills, which, sure, tongue-in-cheek, but even 20 years ago, maybe kind of prescient, right? Prescient in terms of what skills we might want to put on a resume. And so I talk to clients all the time about maybe digging a little deeper in terms of our software skills. And a good example of that is ISC2 has released a free cybersecurity certification recently. And I've elbowed quite a few folks to seriously consider that. And I see a lot of folks on their resume really not mention key skills like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Project, Power BI, what have you, Salesforce, skills that specifically speak to maybe sales or operations or project management or teaching, and might be called out in a job description, but if not specifically accounted for in a resume, that may lead to a flat interview or maybe a bit of a stumble. So again, as I mentioned before, kind of that concept of if it ain't on the page, can it be on the stage? But one could argue the world we live in now, maybe all of us have to talk about analytics or adaptability, cybersecurity, coding, or this really interesting concept of neuroplasticity, being able to learn new things, whether that's languages, world languages, computer languages, what have you. So my thinking is these 3 categories, maybe if we dig a little bit deeper or think of them a little bit non-traditionally, might open some interesting doors for us as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of Dr. Dynamite. So again, as he reminds us, you got skills. I think that's true of all of us. We all really do have skills, and it's okay to talk about your skills. It's not always bragging. And so a good deal of what I do is help folks understand their skills, communicate what they are, and then maybe how they translate to new environments. All right, so I want to hear from you. What are your top skills? How do you communicate your skills to others? Let me know in the comments, or a direct message is just fine too. But if nothing else, I hope this webisode got you to think a little bit more about what your skills are, how you communicate them. Maybe in an interview, or maybe if you do more interviewing yourself, perhaps if you're a hiring manager, an HR professional, maybe a recruiter, how do you ask questions about someone's skills to really understand who they are and what they've done, perhaps what they could do. And thank you very much for the film, Searchlight Pictures, Paramount Pictures, MTV. Wow, I can hardly believe it's been 20 years. A bit mind-blowing. Thank you to Reddit for the anonymous meme from above. I did borrow that. I didn't see an author, so my apologies if there's an author who was credited and I missed that. And Brandsmith, oh my gosh, that portrait looks really, really cool. I gotta get one of those. If you folks feel like sending one to me, please do. That would look great in my office. And of course, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy this series as much as I'm having fun writing, recording, and editing these as well. A few sources that I typically cite for the different episodes are right there on your screen, and you'll see some of that in the notes on YouTube. If you're reaching out to me, feel free. JOHN, my first name, John at johndavidson.com, or JOHN at olympicresume.com is great. My office number is right there. Feel free to check me out at olympicresume.com or architectinfinity.com. And of course, thank you to everyone, the viewers, my clients, thank you so much, my supporters, my students, and again, the viewers. So thank you very much. I hope you found this entertaining and or informative. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, enjoy. Thank you. Take care and be well. Music credits, as usual, it's Ghostrifter, Luke Hall, Sakura, and Chillpeach. Please go check them out online. I believe they all still have active YouTube channels. And if you ask nicely and cite to their music, you should be able to use their music like I do for your own content. So check them out, give them a listen. Good stuff. So thank all of you for the great music. I think it makes these episodes a little bit more tolerable and palatable for all my